Do you want me to start, Lan?
Sure.
Okay. We're 1 minute past 1, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to, this is the third High Performance Architecture Forum in a series we're running this year. Big shout out to Lan, who has organised this. My name is Phillip. I'm head of school at UNSW Built Environment and a member of the High Performance team, so I'm really looking forward to and enjoying this series of lectures. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge that I'm on Bejigal land today. I'm on UNSW campus. And I'd like to acknowledge that the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on have been caring for this land for tens of thousands of years. I'd like to pay my respects to elders both past and present and extend those respects to any Indigenous or First Nations peoples who are joining us today. So today's speakers are going to be Associate Professor Lan Ding. She is a UNSW High Performance Architecture convener and project leader in the Cooling South Melbourne project. And Miss Renae Walton, who's Senior Sustainability Policy and Strategy Advisor in the City of Port Phillip and an advisory group member of South East Council's Climate Change Alliance and chaired their project control group for the Climate Change Asset Vulnerability Assessment Project. As you can see from the slide here today, the topic's going to be the Cooling South Melbourne project. This is a case study that received an award for excellence in strategy at the 2022 City of Port Phillip Design and Development Awards. And look, I know we're in the middle of a bit of a cold snap at the moment. You can see I'm wearing a very thick coat and drinking hot tea. I've got my little heater on next to me. But we all know that heat waves are increasing in both severity and frequency. And the consequences of this on occupant health, occupant comfort, and on building energy use are significant. So this is a topic that's extremely relevant to anyone in the built environment who seeks to create more sustainable urban spaces and places. A bit of information, but housekeeping, this session will be recorded, so we appreciate if you do switch off your microphone now and your video if you don't want to be seen for recording. And if you have any questions, please place them in the chat and they will be answered at the end of the webinar. Or if they don't get a chance, we'll always pick them up via email. So that's me done. Without further ado, I'd like to pass over to today's speakers, Lan and Renae.
Thanks, Phil, so much. Cooling South Melbourne is a collaborative project by UNSW High Performance Architecture and the City of Port Phillip, aiming for developing a greener, cooler, and more livable city, which can adapt to climate change, especially urban overheating. Climate change and extreme heat are the challenges of our time. For example, record high temperatures this summer in Europe. The left figure shows the projected median global warming across different scenarios. The right figure shows average surface temperature changes in Eastern Australia. Without mitigation actions, it's likely to experience warming greater than 1.7 degrees in the next 20 years in Eastern Australia. Australia already had hotter summers, for example, 1.5 above the long-term average temperature in summer of 2018 to 2019. Western Sydney reached 47 degrees. These two heat maps show the surface temperatures of Great Sydney and the Sydney LGA in summer. It was also the hottest summer in the Victoria at the same time. Melbourne reached 42 degrees, which was a 1 in 10-year heat event. Urban overheating has a high impact not only on autothermal comfort, but also human health and peak electricity demand. The right figure shows Melbourne areas most vulnerable to extreme heat. Our research is to explore urban development approaches to mitigate urban overheating. Mitigation falls into two areas, public realms and built form. For example, to what extent do urban form, parks, greenery, waterways, cool roofs, and materials help mitigate urban overheating? In the past, we developed urban heat island mitigation decision support tool and index through CRC for low carbon living. It provides a decision support tool to inform urban policy development assessment and planning practices. This tool integrates scientific models and mitigation technologies to provide what-if scenario analysis across both building and urban scales. In addition, it provides an urban heat island mitigation index to support planning controls by local governments. This design support tool has been applied to the mitigation scenario analysis of Parramatta Civic Link, Green Square Town Centre. These two are CBD redevelopment and also greenfield development with residential buildings in Macassar Heights. This is a screenshot of the online urban heat mitigation index, which is also integrated with the decision support tool to provide broad guidelines to support decision-making by governments and planning practices. I would like to show a short 3-minute video of the decision support tool and index. This is the proposed Green Square Town Centre redevelopment by Lancome and the City of Sydney. And this is the Parramatta Civic Link redevelopment. This is the Macassar Heights Greenfield development. So they show totally different urban typologies. Thermal videos were collected to identify hotspots in those development areas. This is Parramatta. And Macassar Heights. So this is existing site of Green Square. And this is the proposed development. Alternative development scenarios include the public realm, built form, and also predefined combination of mitigation strategies. Air temperature distribution from different development options can be viewed. If selecting a location, it will show the air temperature. Urban heat mitigation indicators such as the average or maximum air temperature reduction can also be viewed on this 3D platform. And users can also query the information of alternative developments against the Green Star community requirements, or click on a building to see the building type, building materials information, status information such as it has been proposed or implemented or on the DA process. So this is the urban heat mitigation scenario analysis for Parramatta Civic Link redevelopment. This is the Urban Heat Mitigation Performance Index, providing broad guidelines to support decision-making by governments. Users can query mitigation strategies for specific objective climate region and urban context. And this is a heat vulnerability index developed by other UNSW team, providing the index on social risk under extreme heat. This project was conducted in collaboration with 16 government and industry partners. The Cooling South Melbourne project was conducted in 2020. South Melbourne is located within the city of Port Phillip, LGA. The area indicated in a white line is the South Melbourne study area. It's a key development area for increasing density and future growth. It's also considered by the city of Port Phillip to be a heat vulnerability hotspot. The city of Port Phillip has commenced a new South Melbourne structure plan. This offers timely opportunity for new development controls and also to embed the impact analysis of cooling interventions from this project. Melbourne is typically slightly cooler than most other Australian cities in summer. However, it still experiences heat waves. It had record temperatures exceeding 45 degrees. The South Melbourne study area has 13 precincts. We adapted to 14 precincts in this research. There is a mix of building types in these precincts. For example, Victorian era shop fronts, contemporary commercial and retail development, heritage buildings area, and social housing. The precincts highlighted in orange in the third image are business and mixed-use areas. They have significant redevelopment potential. The right image shows examples of large exposed roofs in this area. This contributes to high roof surface temperatures in summer. To help understand the existing urban heat challenges facing South Melbourne, we collected a heat map, the left image, using a light plane. This indicates surface temperatures throughout the study area. Some important findings include, for example, areas of lower surface temperatures are mainly in the heritage residential area to the south and the social housing area, because there is a higher street coverage, canopy coverage there. However, darker roofs of heritage buildings still contributed to high roof surface temperatures. Areas of higher surface temperatures are mainly the business, retail, and industrial areas to the north. Contributing factors include wide unshaded streets, compact urban context, and large exposed roof surfaces. Importantly, these are key development areas. So it's crucial that development of these hotspots can effectively mitigate the impact of urban overheating. The right image and the next slide shows specific urban overheating challenges in the 14 precincts. For example, the number 2 precinct has a compact and medium-rise urban context. Those surface materials absorb and store large amounts of heat. In addition, large areas of unshaded impervious ground cover, for example, the wide streets, contributed to higher surface temperatures. The compact urban form in this precinct limits opportunities for urban vegetations. The number 12 precinct has heritage residential buildings and higher street canopy coverage. However, their darker or low performance roof materials contributed to high roof surface temperatures. To monitor the real-time thermal environment, we have installed air temperature sensors in this study area. Those sensors data was collected to urban heat mitigation decision support tool for visualization and also used for validating modeling results. This diagram provides an overview of the key process of this project. Firstly, a range of data sets were collected, including air and surface temperatures, bomb data, climate projections, urban typologies, and development characteristics. Then, UNSW and the City of Port Phillip teams co-developed cooling intervention options for the South Melbourne study area. We considered Greater Melbourne as the context. We modeled cooling intervention scenarios for both 2020 and 2050, including mesoscale modeling for Greater Melbourne using the WRF model and the macroscale modeling for the South Melbourne study area using computational fluid dynamics models. The scientific evidence and recommendations generated from this project will support development and planning of South Melbourne towards 2050. We modeled cooling interventions, including high albedo materials, urban greenery, irrigation, and a combination of interventions using the mesoscale modeling for Greater Melbourne. The right charts show a comparative analysis. Weather conditions are different in 2020 and 2050, but we can see the similar trends. For example, a combination of all interventions made the highest impact. Besides, high albedo urban surfaces were found highly effective, especially during the day. And the increased urban greenery were also effective, especially at the light. We would suggest that combination intervention, including increased greenery and cool materials, can maximize the cooling effect. Then we modeled 9 defined intervention scenarios for the South Melbourne study area. They are tailored to the City of Port Phillip's planning controls for redevelopment in these precincts. Scenario 1 involves the impact analysis of a set of proposed new buildings with a business as usual green infrastructure scenario for private green coverage. These new buildings are located in the key business and mixed-use development precinct, highlighted in orange in the left image. The right thermal images indicate air and surface temperature. It provides a base case for comparing to other intervention scenarios. Scenario 2 involves the same set of new buildings from the scenario 1, but with a moderated green infrastructure scenario for private green coverage. A moderated green infrastructure scenario equates to 40 to 50% of the site areas as urban greenery, including vertical for all new buildings. This scenario also includes additional street trees and rain gardens for mitigating localized hotspots that may require changes to future road and pedestrian configurations. This intervention scenario can reduce street level air temperature under current and future climate conditions compared to the scenario 1 business as usual scenario. And also air temperature reductions from this scenario are more widespread in these development areas because the increase of private green coverage for new buildings and the density of additional street trees and rain gardens. Scenario 3 involves the same set of new buildings from scenario 1, but with an optimized green infrastructure scenario for private green coverage. This optimized scenario equates to over 60% of the site areas as urban greenery, including vertical for all new buildings. This scenario also includes additional street trees and rain gardens. New buildings with this optimized private green coverage only have a slight improvement in street level cooling potential compared to a moderate green coverage. Scenario 4 includes the same parameters as scenario 1, but with cool materials applied to all streets, footpaths, and private hard surfaces. From the heat maps and charts, we can see significant reduction in air and surface temperatures for the entire area, especially in the northern development precincts. Maximum air temperature reduction can reach 1.5 degrees. Maximum surface temperature reduction can reach 13.4 degrees. This is because of the combination of variant built form from the new buildings and cool materials for all hard surfaces, including wide shaded, unshaded streets. Scenario 5 includes the same parameters as scenario 1, but with cool roofs applied to all new and existing buildings. The cooling effect of cool roofs is evenly distributed across the study area, but not as effective as scenario 4, which is the intervention with cool materials for all urban hard surfaces. Scenario 6 applies cool roofs to all existing buildings without any new development, but including heritage restricted areas. It can also reduce air and surface temperatures throughout the study area. Scenario 7 is a combination of all interventions, including new buildings with moderate private green coverage, additional public realm greenery, cool roofs for street level urban surface, and cool materials for street level urban surface, and cool roofs for all new and existing buildings. Similar to the impact analysis of Greater Melbourne, a combination of all cooling interventions is the most effective strategy to mitigate urban overheating. This scenario can lead to maximum air temperature reduction of up to 1.6 degrees and typical peak surface temperature reductions of up to 15.9 degrees. Scenario 8 considers placement of water misting systems in hotspots. The water misting systems, together with a combination of all interventions, can maximize the cooling effect. Where building height influences the cooling effect, Scenario 9 involves a new set of proposed buildings with building height exceeding the maximum permissible planning controls, ranging from 8 to 24 stories. This scenario has considered significant setbacks to facilitate urban ventilations. The increase in building height creates shaded areas in the morning and afternoon. As a result, it has a slight decrease in surface and air temperatures, compared to scenario 1 due to the shaded areas. This scenario carefully considered scale, setbacks, shading, wind flow, building integrated greenery and materials to avoid negative impacts on street level thermal comfort. Without these considerations, an increase in building height and density is likely to have negative impacts on outdoor thermal comfort in the South Melbourne study area. These charts show the combination impacts of all cooling interventions for the South Melbourne study area. The combination of all interventions together with the water misting systems for hotspots had the highest cooling potential, followed by the same scenario without water misting systems. Cool materials for all public and private hard surfaces can significantly reduce street level air and surface temperatures. Its impact is greater than cool roofs. The cool roof intervention had an evenly distributed street level cooling effect in the study area. Its impact is slightly greater than the private and public urban greenery. Moderate private green coverage scenario proved a suitable option because the optimized scenario provided only a minor cooling benefit compared to the moderate. We use the Universal Thermal Climate Index to indicate different levels of heat stress. The higher the number is, the higher heat stress is. Results shows new buildings with a moderate or optimized private green coverage with additional street trees and rain gardens can improve outdoor thermal conditions and mitigate urban stress. The urban heat island decision support tool introduced at the beginning has been extended to provide impact analysis of all cooling interventions for the South Melbourne study area. It can be accessed online. This research has generated key findings and recommendations on public realm and built form interventions to inform the new South Melbourne structure plan. All 9 cooling interventions can effectively mitigate urban overheating on the current and future climate conditions. For example, increasing urban greenery and addition of cool materials can be applied in business and retail precincts, especially those wide unshaded streets. Moderate green infrastructure for private green coverage is recommended for new buildings in the redevelopment precincts. Cool roofs can be considered for existing buildings with aging roof materials and also new buildings to reduce roof surface temperatures. The combination of all interventions together with water cooling systems will be able to respond to the diversity of land use and urban typologies. It will maximize the cooling potential at different times of the day. A set of recommendations from this research has been provided to City of Port Phillip to support the future planning of South Melbourne towards 2050. This project received award for excellence at the City of Port Phillip Design and Development Awards this year. I would like to thank UNSW research team and the City of Port Phillip team, and also other colleagues who provided support and assistance. I hand over to Renae Walton from the City of Port Phillip.
Thanks, Lan. I will just share my screen with you all.
Sure.
Let me try that again. Please let me know if you cannot see that.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So thank you for, firstly, the invite to present today. And I would like to acknowledge that today I'm calling in from the land of the Bunurong people, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that the area that we're talking about, South Melbourne, has both Bunurong and Wurundjeri custodians, and so I would also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people. So as Lan has just taken us through, the City of Port Phillip did engage UNSW to work specifically on a project to look at cooling in South Melbourne. So for those of you who don't know anything about South Melbourne and the City of Port Phillip, I am just going to hopefully make my slides go forward. They don't seem to be doing that. Are any of those slides moving forward, Lan?
They're not moving forward, I don't think, at the moment.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let me try again.
So
I think you're sharing, Lan, is that correct?
No, do you want me to share the slide, or you want to share the slide?
At the moment, it is saying that UNSW is sharing my screen. So I'm going to try one more time to unshare and reshare.
Sure.
Sorry about this.
No problem. Yeah, we can see.
Okay, and let's see if we can go forward. All right,
Yep.
This seems to be working now. Great. So as I was saying, for those of you who don't know much about the City of Port Phillip, we're an inner Bayside municipality in Melbourne. We have an estimated resident population of around 112,000, and we're a well-established city, and we have significant growth happening in both the Fisherman's Bend urban renewal area, but also within the South Melbourne area. So South Melbourne has been nominated by the state government as a significant growth area. And so that means that we will be expecting, and we're also planning for, a lot more growth. The rest of our city, as I said, is really quite dense, and we don't really have much leeway and movement. So by the 2050, we're expecting, underneath the high emissions scenario, quite a significant increase in temperature, as is everywhere else. And although heat isn't necessarily our biggest climate change impact that we're expecting in the city, we're actually expecting bigger impacts from flooding and sea level rise. We're certainly also planning for significant heat. And we also know that, with it being that in a Melbourne, very close to the City of Melbourne, we do have those sort of, we're impacted by the external environment that we don't have as much control over, namely the City of Melbourne. So I guess as we go further along, I'll talk to how we could potentially collaborate in the future across Greater Melbourne. So in terms of our responsibility as a council, we're really aware that in Victoria, we have to respond to both the Climate Change Act and the Local Government Act, which for those non-Victorians, I've got a little bit on the screen there about what, as a local government, we are expected to respond to. So we're really expected to make decisions based on the data that we have, and to really take a approach, a risk management approach. So, not deferring decision making until we have, undoubtedly correct data. We have to really use the data that we have now to make informed decisions. And we also need to share this decision making with our community. And then underneath the Local Government Act, we also need to give priority to achieving the best outcomes for the community, including future generations. And I did want to touch on that because I feel like as we, previously a lot of our planning, a lot of our decisions are based on our previous weather patterns. And so even though we might have in mind, future population growth, etc., we haven't necessarily had to keep in mind a different climate. Now, as we know, things have certainly changed and we do need to keep both things in mind. Oh, now I'm having slide issues again.
Yes, it's working. We can see.
Oh, you can see that next. So
Yes.
I've actually gone backwards. Hold on. Okay. You can see a slide, hopefully, that says Journey to Now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to provide a little bit of background on how we got to, this particular project. So we undertook some thermal mapping of the city in 2012, and this involved some flyovers of our whole city. And with that data, we were able to get a really good understanding of where some of those hotspots in our city were. We then looked at, with some researchers from RMIT, we looked at the combination of not only heat, but also the land use planning controls, and also our demographics, getting an understanding of our vulnerable community. And so the intersection of those three particular things actually pointed out that South Melbourne was a real heat hotspot. We've got a vulnerable community, and we've also got some land use planning. It's a really commercial district, which means that there are a lot of people out on the street on hot days. And we also know, as I'll go into in the next slide, we don't actually have that much vegetation in the area. So we then worked with CSIRO to create something called a My Climate tool. So this is available still online, where anyone in the city or anyone outside the city can actually go and pinpoint down to about a metre square and get a temperature reading. And so this informs or allows the community to really see what's happening in their particular location. We then went on to adopt a new sustainable environment strategy in 2018, and we declared a climate emergency in 2019. One of the actions in our Act and Adapt Sustainable Environment Strategy was actually redoing that flyover. Now, when we thought about what had happened across the municipality since 2012, we didn't actually think that doing another flyover would give us any new information. We didn't feel like it would, what would we actually do with that data apart from sort of having said that we've ticked a box and done it. So we reassessed what we were actually trying to solve through gathering more information. And where we landed on was, wouldn't it be great if we could actually test and model some interventions to see how we could really come up with some solutions that we could implement. And we also knew that, that the South Melbourne Structure Plan was in its planning phase at that stage. Our Sustainability and Climate Change team sits in the same department as our strategic planners and urban designers. So we knew that this work was coming up, and we really wanted to provide some value add to that structure planning process. So we worked quite closely with them to, as Lam said, model some of those or come up with some of those and co-design some of those interventions. And so the Cooling South Melbourne report was done. We're now heavily into all the pre-work for the structure plan, and we're also trialling what's called the Green Factor Green Infrastructure tool, which is a voluntary tool that we're asking developers to use. And what that does is it allows developers to put in how much vegetation and green infrastructure they are designing into that property, and it will give them a rating. So I will touch on that in a second, and Lan already has, but that's also something else, I guess, that is important to mention for this particular context. So as both of us had mentioned, South Melbourne is really quite dense. There's a mix of land use planning controls, and it currently functions quite well with visitation both during the week and with the commercial and business district. But also on the weekends, we have the South Melbourne markets, which is definitely a place to visit. And I do my shopping there every week, but it's somewhere that is really a hub that people come to. And I've already mentioned, it's a state government nominated major enterprise precinct and major activity centre, which means that we are expecting a lot more growth in that area, and we've been given a remit to basically plan for that. The 2018 I should spell that out for anyone who's not from Melbourne, but the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. They did some heat assessment in 2018, and the data indicated that pockets of South Melbourne were rated between 3 and 5 in terms of heat vulnerability, with 5 being the highest. And it's particularly vulnerable, as I mentioned before, due to the high population density, the lack of trees and vegetation, and the high proportion of vulnerable population. This is, I guess, a bit of a snapshot view of the area. So the study area came all the way down to sort of the bottom of the screen, but the structure plan is covering that area in orange. To the sort of in the middle area, or is highlighted, it's called Emerald Hill Court. So north and west of there, we're really expecting a large changeover in what is currently 3 to 4 stories for the most part, commercial properties, a lot of warehouses type scenario at the moment. We're expecting that to really change over in the next sort of 10 to 20 years. There's a lot of development expected. There is development happening at the moment. So that's an area very close to CBD Melbourne, great transport connections, and is also one of the areas that is indicated as being the hottest. So I thought I'd just put up a couple of photos of the actual area. So it's an eclectic mix of architecture. We've got on the top left-hand side the picture with 7-Eleven in it. This is Clarendon Street, the main street within South Melbourne. We can see that there's really wide asphalt pavements. That's a heritage protected awning over there. The vegetation alongside the awning is always sort of kept at that height. It doesn't actually grow much higher. And it is really quite hot there. And then if you go across to the other side of the page, we've got, again, Clarendon Street from a different angle looking into the CBD. Some of you may know this view quite well, but again, we've got a really wide street. We've got tram lines, mix of architecture, heritage properties. It gets really quite hot in those areas. And then the bottom images are, again, wide streets, lots of asphalt, some pretty poor looking medians with a eucalypt that seems to be, it's getting there. But I think that as we head towards planning what South Melbourne is like in the future, we can certainly do more with our medians to create a environment where those trees can really thrive. And then one of the things within South Melbourne is that we also have we have no setbacks. So you can see in this bottom right-hand picture that this is the commercial sort of area I was talking about before. That's warehouse at the moment, and we're expecting a lot of that to change over. You can see that there's no setbacks on any of those properties, and really high, basically 90 to 100% site coverage with building. So at the moment, it's very hot, but as we change over to what this looks like in the next 10 to 20 years, we actually have a huge opportunity. This is some of what the private properties look like. So you can see again, we've got some heritage properties, terrace housing, that bottom image, we've got some, change to the housing structure, and people have tried to put some greenery on the front of their, garage. They've got some vines growing there, and again, no setbacks. 3 to 4 story properties. So as Lan mentioned, it was a real co-design process to work with our strategic planners and urban designers and the sustainability professionals to co-design some of the opportunities that were then modelled. We workshopped what could happen in both public realm and also in the private realm. And as I mentioned earlier, we also are trialling that green factor tool for the ESD professionals. Now, one of the reasons that we wanted to actually model interventions was to get an understanding of what cooling options we could try and implement through the structure plan that would provide us with the most bang for buck. We didn't want to be, asking for really expensive options in terms of, the development community if we didn't have an understanding of the impact that that would actually have on reducing heat. So Lan mentioned earlier, but I wanted to also mention it, this idea of how much greenery we could ask private developments to implement on their property. So as the modelling, when we did that, it was actually evident that a moderate coverage of properties with green infrastructure, so we're talking canopies or vines, something that would shade the property, that the moderate coverage provided the best bang for buck. And actually asking them to go into that high level coverage didn't actually reduce the air and surface temperature significantly. And so when we think about, what would a developer be most willing to do, spend an extra 2 or 3 million on high coverage of the site, when actually it wouldn't, it would potentially not be something that they'd be willing to do, and it wouldn't actually make that much difference. So that was a really good outcome for us, that we found out that the moderate coverage option is actually does provide that best bang for buck. For anyone who wants to know more about the green factor tool, there is a website you can go to that I mentioned there. So I wanted to touch on some of the key opportunities that we're looking to implement going forward. So we want to definitely protect the pedestrian comfort and reduce urban heat. So we're looking at things like advocating for undergrounding of services. There's a lot of power lines and tram lines through there which prevent canopy growth and can cause, the hollowing out of trees, etc., and the trees not being in the best condition possible. Also looking at some more mid and low level vegetation to allow the evapotranspiration at the surface level as well. Looking at improving the amenity of our green open spaces that we already have around that area. Obviously planting more trees, and then also looking at diverting stormwater from our roads for irrigating the street trees for some water sensitive urban design solutions. And also looking at how we could really, funnel that water in, especially in those areas that are prone to flooding, to try and use that water for cooling impact and for that irrigation of the vegetation. One of the other things that I would like to sort of push for a trial of is the water misting systems along key pedestrian routes, especially underneath the things like that awning that I showed earlier in the photo. In terms of private realm, advocating for the innovative and diverse building designs that really look to mitigate urban heat island effect through cool roofs and facade materials. Also looking at more green coverage, landscaping and shading devices. So we're really looking to use some catalyst projects in the South Melbourne area to really trial some of these things. So we've got the Emerald Hill Community Wellbeing Hub, which is led by the Victorian Health Building Authority. We're hoping that we can get some really good options to provide some cooling in that particular location. We're looking at a new police station and also a tram link that we could look at, what's currently concrete and asphalt could become green. So we'd like to use some catalyst opportunities as well. So you can see this is a residential area, low level of construction, of new construction anticipated. We already have a lot of so we already have a lot of white roofs here. So our best sort of interventions in this area would actually be through the public realm. So looking at how could we get reduce some of those pavement widths, some of the street widths, and get some trees in there? How could we also combine that with surface treatments? Because as Lan said earlier, you know, that combination of interventions is where we're going to get some really good outcomes. And then this is that high growth area that is in sort of the closer to the CBD. We're expecting a lot of that turnover. We're expecting a really different built form character, and you know, that really moving from that warehousey 2-3 story to more like an 8 to 10 story large large developments. And so I guess one of the things we're looking for there is that green infrastructure and the materials, looking at some building typologies and how we could work with the developers to get some good outcomes. So our next steps for the South Melbourne Structure Plan and the using of this information is really listed on the screen there. This is a long-term plan over the next 20 years. It's going to be sort of rolled out, but the planning scheme changes would come into effect from 2025. And we're really looking at in the interim, because obviously we don't want to wait 20 years, we want to be improving those public spaces, looking at the surface treatments, looking at the combination of cooling options, and really working with our partners and collaborating with both the developers to advocate the use of the green factor tool, but also with the state government to look at how we could pilot some of these things, not only in our city, but how we could do similar interventions in other municipalities around Greater Melbourne to test where we're getting, you know, our best outcomes. Because as I said earlier, we really need to work together as a group of councils rather than just each individually. So yeah, that's me. I'll hand back to you, Lan.
Thank you so much, Renae. And there are some pre-questions during the webinar and also some questions in the chat. Now we start the question and answer session. So one question is, continued development of these tools is exciting. How straightforward is it to extend the UHI and MPI analysis using the 3D models to other locations from the three now presented? Especially, is it sort of analysis a precinct developer could readily commission to test the development design responses? I'm happy to answer this question. Thanks, Peter, for this question. Yes, it's straightforward. So I think firstly, we need to identify local problems and hotspots, and then modeling mitigation and intervention options, which a precinct developer should consider. So I think definitely this design support tool with 3D visualization can be extended to cover more precinct areas or more case studies to support the precinct development, in especially decision making. Next question. If you could choose one learning from this project to embed in climate change planning at the Greater Melbourne or state level, what would it be? Over to Renae.
Thanks, Lan. I think that, as I mentioned, working on some pilot projects across various municipalities around Melbourne to really allow that comparison of what works, and you know, not every scenario is going to work in every situation, but if we could get some real support to look at you know, the combination of misting and cool pavements, that would be definitely one thing. I think that also another one would be how we can influence the development community in the private realm to really look at materiality, to look at the amount of glazing, to look at shading, etc. I think moving into an understanding of how that materiality can impact the internal environment as well, and obviously emissions and electricity consumption. So I think that selling that to the development community is something we perhaps could work on collaboratively across Melbourne.
Thanks, Renae. Another question: what are the most effective best value cooling options for regional towns with low residential numbers, large areas, and low income? I'm happy to answer this question. We found the moderated private greenery coverage is a suitable option, which can be applied in the low density regional area as well. Cool roofs can also help. We found from other greenfield low density case studies, roof surface temperature differences can reach 10 degrees between white and dark roofs of residential buildings. Cool roofs and building integrated greenery can improve indoor thermal comfort as well, reducing cooling loads in summer, especially for low-income people without air conditioning. Next question. Fantastic presentations. Thank you. I understand the importance of protecting existing heritage verandas over public footpaths. For new developments, could it be mandated that they include green roofs, and could council take on responsibility for their ongoing maintenance as they would be located in the public realm? Over to Renae.
This is a really interesting question, Ben. Thank you for that. I guess one of the things with the new developments, if we were looking to have green roofs put, you know, mandated for those developments on top of any awnings, I guess that there would be an expectation that because it was the property of the developer, that they would actually maintain it. But I know that there's some of my council colleagues online, so if they want to jump in and say something different, then by all means they can do that. I guess one of the things that we'd also be advocating for is green walls, because we do know that green walls actually have a lot, you know, of benefit in the private. In the public realm when it comes to evapotranspiration. So that would be something that we would also be advocating for. And I think it's not necessarily a council responsibility to maintain those things, because it does actually benefit the private building.
Thanks, Renae, so much. Because of time, we will email you the answers to remaining questions after the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. The next high performance architecture webinar will be in August, presented by Associate Professor Paul Osman. His topic is green infrastructure development. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Bye.